The cruelty of a human being who unalived two women and fed them to pigs exhibits a horrifying level of inhumanity. This gruesome act demonstrates extreme disregard for human life, compounded by the effort to completely dehumanize the victims. It reflects sadism and a terrifying indifference to suffering, where not only are the women unalived, but their remains are treated as waste. This is a calculated, depraved attempt to erase all traces of their existence, underscoring the perpetrator's detachment from empathy and any moral boundaries. Hello, aloha, bonjour, hola, marhaba, hello, ni hao, ujambo, namaste everyone. Welcome to Crime Watch Vault. We explore true crime stories, solved and unsolved and intriguing mysteries. We respectfully discuss stories already in the public domain. If you're interested, click the subscribe button to join our community. Today's story takes us to Limpopo Province, South Africa, known for its rich cultural heritage and agricultural economy. Located in the northernmost part of the country, Limpopo shares borders with Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Mozambique. Despite its natural beauty and thriving farming sector, the province faces significant socio-economic challenges, including poverty and high unemployment rates. Limpopo's tranquil landscape was disrupted by the discovery of an unimaginable crime, shedding light on the ongoing struggles faced by many in these farming communities. Mabutho Ndlovu is a 38-year-old Zimbabwean national whose life took a harrowing turn on August 12, 2024, when he survived an attack that claimed the lives of two women, Locadia Ndlovu and Maria Makgatho. Mabutho, Locadia, and Maria had been scavenging for food on a farm owned by Zachariah Olivier, a common act of survival for those living in extreme poverty. The farm, located in Limpopo Province, South Africa, was a vast property, but it became the scene of unimaginable brutality that day. Desperate and hungry, Mabutho, Locadia, and Maria entered Olivier's farm, unaware of the deadly consequences that awaited them. The group had ventured onto the land to search for food, a grim reflection of their impoverished circumstances. When Olivier, accompanied by his two farm employees, Adrian, 19, and William Musora, 45, discovered the trio on his property, an argument ensued. Olivier accused them of trespassing, a charge that soon spiraled into violence. In an act of calculated cruelty, Olivier pow-powed both Locadia and Maria without hesitation. As the women fell to the ground, Mabutho was also pow-powed, but his injury wasn't immediately fatal. Witnessing his companions unaliving, he knew he needed to escape. Despite his pow-powed wound, Mabutho managed to crawl away from the scene, hiding in the dense brush surrounding the farm. Olivier and his employees, meanwhile, dragged the lifeless bodies of Locadia and Maria toward the pigsty, intending to feed the corpses to the pigs. The goal was to erase all evidence of their crime, and the pigs, hungry and indiscriminate eaters, would serve as the tools of this grotesque cover-up. Mabutho's escape and survival were miraculous. He spent hours crawling through the harsh, uneven terrain in search of help. Early on the morning of August 13, 2024, a local resident discovered him, barely conscious and gravely wounded. The resident immediately called for help, and Mabutho was rushed to a nearby hospital where he received critical medical care. Doctors worked to stabilize his condition, and although the physical wounds were severe, his mental trauma ran even deeper. When he finally regained enough strength to speak, he recounted the horror that had unfolded on Olivier's farm. His testimony was not only shocking but essential in bringing attention to the crime. Mabutho's words formed the cornerstone of the police investigation. Based on his account, police launched an investigation and arrived at Olivier's farm on August 16, 2024. What they found there confirmed Mabutho's horrifying story. Following his directions, the officers headed toward the pigsty, where the remains of the two women lay in various stages of decomposition. The pigs had partially consumed the bodies, leaving behind fragmented bones and decaying flesh strewn across the enclosure. The scene was both revolting and heartbreaking, as it showed the extreme lengths Olivier and his employees had gone to in order to dispose of the evidence. The investigation intensified, with forensics teams meticulously gathering what little remained of the two women's bodies. Every scrap of flesh and bone became crucial in piecing together the identities of Locadia and Maria, as well as in solidifying the case against Olivier and his men. The state of the bodies confirmed that they had been left to decompose for days, making the task of forensic identification all the more challenging. Nonetheless, the police were able to verify the survivors' account, and this evidence became central to the case. When the police approached Olivier and his employees for questioning on August 16, 2024, their responses were chilling. Olivier initially denied any knowledge of the missing women, claiming that he had not seen any trespassers on his land. His demeanor was cold, and his insistence on ignorance of the situation immediately raised suspicions among the officers. lled and Musora, standing by their employer's side, mirrored his story, though their nervous body language betrayed their fear. It wasn't until officers pressed harder, referencing Mabutho's testimony and the discovery of the remains in the pigsty, that Olivier's composure began to crack. As the weight of the evidence mounted, Olivier's denial transformed into evasion. He attempted to justify the unaliving, claiming self-defense and suggesting that the women had been aggressive when confronted. However, this narrative collapsed under scrutiny, as there was no evidence to support such a claim. The brutality of the crime, particularly the decision to feed the bodies to pigs, rendered his argument implausible. lled and Musora, less practiced in deception, fumbled through their responses. They echoed Olivier's claims but struggled to maintain consistency under questioning. lled, young and inexperienced, appeared particularly shaken, and it wasn't long before his version of events began to fall apart. Musora, caught between his loyalty to Olivier and his fear of legal repercussions as an undocumented worker, offered little beyond weak affirmations of Olivier's story. By the end of the day, the police had enough evidence to arrest all three men on charges of murder and tampering with evidence. As they were led away in handcuffs, Olivier maintained his stoic demeanor, while lled and Musora appeared visibly distressed. Their attempt to cover up their heinous act had failed, and they now faced the full weight of the law. Mabutho Ndlovu's incredible survival and his courageous testimony had been instrumental in exposing the crime, ensuring that justice would be sought for Locadia and Maria. As news of the murders spread, public outrage grew, particularly in the Limpopo community where the crime had taken place. The incident, which first came to light in mid-August 2024, sparked a wave of protests and demonstrations, both locally and nationally. The use of pigs to dispose of the bodies was seen as a particularly grotesque element, making the crime all the more shocking and incomprehensible to the public. In the days following the discovery of the bodies on August 16, 2024, local community leaders called for justice and accountability, condemning the crime as a symptom of the broader social issues affecting South Africa's rural farming communities. Many viewed the murders through the lens of historical and racial tensions that persist in these regions, with some framing the killings as another example of the violence and exploitation faced by impoverished workers and scavengers. Human rights organizations quickly became involved, decrying not only the brutality of the unaliving but also the conditions that had driven the women to scavenge in the first place. The crime became a rallying point for activists seeking to address poverty, inequality, and the rights of laborers in South Africa. Protests outside the courthouse were frequent, with calls for reform in the farming sector echoing across the country. The public and community outcry was a powerful reminder that the crime had touched on deep-seated issues far beyond the murder itself, bringing attention to the need for change in rural South Africa. The trial began on August 19, 2024, at the Mankweng Magistrates Court, where the horrific murders of Locadia Ndlovu and Makgatho took center stage. The accused, farmer Zachariah Olivier, 60, and his employees, Adrian, 19, and William Musora, 45, stood before the court, facing charges of murder and tampering with evidence. The case had already drawn national attention due to the brutal nature of the crime and the sensational details of the bodies being fed to pigs. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting its case, relying heavily on the testimony of the sole survivor, who had narrowly escaped being unalived after being shot by Olivier on August 12, 2024. The survivor described how he, along with Ndlovu and Makgatho, had been scavenging for food on Olivier's farm. In vivid detail, he recounted the moment Olivier and his employees confronted them, accusing them of trespassing. The situation quickly turned deadly as Olivier pulled the trigger, unaliving the two women. Forensic experts were called to the stand to explain the state of the decomposing bodies, which were discovered in the pigsty 4 days later on August 16, 2024. The court was shown graphic images of the remains, which had been partially consumed by the pigs. This testimony was crucial in establishing not only the identity of the victims but also the premeditated and callous nature of the crime. The pigs had been used to obliterate evidence, a disturbing attempt by the defendants to cover their tracks. Olivier's defense team argued that the farmer had acted out of fear for his property, claiming the women had been aggressive trespassers. His attorneys attempted to cast the event as a tragic accident, with Olivier merely defending his land from intruders. DeWitt's defense took a different approach, portraying the 19-year-old as a naive and inexperienced worker who was simply following orders. Musora, as an undocumented Zimbabwean laborer, had fewer defenses to fall back on, with his legal team emphasizing his vulnerable status and lack of choice in obeying his employer's commands. However, the defense's arguments were continually undermined by the strong forensic evidence and the survivors' compelling testimony. The prosecution made it clear that this was not a case of self-defense, but a cold-blooded execution followed by a gruesome attempt to erase the women's bodies. The pigs were presented as the final tool in this act of cruelty, used to dehumanize and erase the victims from existence. As the trial progressed into September, the court was packed daily with community members, journalists, and activists. Outside the courtroom, protests erupted, with many decrying the broader issues of farm violence, inequality, and racial tensions in rural South Africa. The unaliving of Ndlovu and Makgatho became a flashpoint for these larger societal grievances, bringing the country's ongoing struggles with farm-related violence into sharp focus. As the trial moved towards its conclusion, the gravity of the charges weighed heavily on the court. Olivier's chilling lack of remorse and the methodical nature of the crime painted a picture of a man who saw human life as disposable. The evidence against lled and Musora, while slightly more nuanced, still indicated a disturbing willingness to participate in the unaliving and subsequent cover-up. By late September 2024, the trial entered its final phase, with closing arguments delivered by both sides. The prosecution maintained that all three men were equally culpable, having played clear roles in the killings and the disposal of the bodies. The defense attempted to sway the jury with appeals to fear, poverty, and obedience to authority, but the overwhelming evidence seemed to point toward inevitable convictions. The court proceedings, filled with gruesome details and powerful testimonies, lasted over a month, culminating in a verdict that would resonate throughout Limpopo and South Africa at large. As of September 2024, Olivier, lled, and Musora remain in custody as their case proceeds. They face charges for the brutal unaliving of two women, Maria Makgatho and Mabutho Ndlovu, whose bodies were found decomposing in a pigsty on Olivier's farm. The trio has also been charged with attempted unaliving, defeating the ends of justice, and possession of illegal firearms. Their bail hearing has been postponed multiple times, with the next court session scheduled for October 2024. As this tragic story comes to a close, our hearts go out to the families of Locadia Ndlovu and Maria Makgatho, whose lives were taken in such a cruel and senseless manner. No words can ease their pain, but we hope justice brings some measure of peace. To Mabutho Ndlovu, the survivor, your strength and courage in sharing your story amidst such trauma are deeply admirable. May you find healing in time. We stand with you all, offering comfort and solidarity during this difficult time. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on this tragic case? We'd love to hear your opinions, so feel free to leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update on this and other important stories. Till next time, goodbye.